The offseason is officially here in Major League Baseball, and decision days are coming up this week for the Guardians. We'll break down what the impact of those decisions are on today's Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into the episode of Locked On Guardians, our favorite half hour of the day. We hope it is yours too, because for the next 30 minutes, we're talking about your Cleveland Guardians, from the majors, the minors, and the draft, everything in between as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, your Cleveland Guardians, every single day during the offseason. I'm Justin Lada, one of your two co-hosts for the show, have been for 3 years. I've also spent 18 years covering the Guardians minor league farm system, so I've seen all the prospects in the system literally grow up from Arizona to Lake County to Akron, all the way up to Columbus.
And I'm Jeff Ellis. Had a moment there where I forgot what I was going to say. I've been here since the start of Locked On. I've only done almost 1,600 of these episodes. You'd think I knew what I was doing. Before this, I was a writer at Scout and 24/7, focused on prospects in the draft nationally. I want to thank you for making today's episode your first listen today and every day, wherever it is you get podcasts, as well as saying a big shout out to all of our everydayers out there.
Yeah, shout out to all the everydayers. Shout out to the insiders. On today's show, Kenny Lofton is back in the news. We'll talk about why, and being snubbed for the Hall of Fame once again is why. We'll talk about how award season for Major League Baseball is driving money in more ways than one for the Guardians. We'll start off today's show talking about the decisions that'll be ahead for the Guardians starting this week. And on today's show, we are brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON. You're going to get $20 off that very first purchase. Also want to do a quick shout out to Insider and Everydayer Daniel H. Said he had a great conversation with the neighbor of his in Mansfield, Ohio. So he wants to know whoever the neighbor was. He forgot the name, but said he had a great conversation. Turns out they are sort of neighbors, and they are both Locked On Guardians insiders. So that's what we're all about. We love bringing the community together and talking Guardians ball, especially when we've lost an extra hour of daylight and baseball season. Those two things happened the same day. We lost baseball season and we lost an hour of daylight the same day. Is that just like poetic for the time of year we're going into, or what?
I mean, I would much rather. I prefer this. I prefer where I get 1 extra hour of sleep as opposed to when you steal an hour of sleep from me at night.
Jeff's like, what is sleep? I don't even know what sleep is. I just live on coffee and caffeine toothpicks, and
I'm still using those. Don't think for a second I'm not. I am still doing one every morning. Thank you, Zippix.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, Jeff's got a bad caffeine habit, as we've learned in the past. Somebody commented, they're like, Jeff, way too much caffeine. I'm very concerned for you.
I'm only having like 7 to 8 cups a day. What?
Not 6-7 cups a day?
6-7. Oh, there we go. Everybody happy?
I heard somebody I heard a conversation, or somebody in college I was in college with, said that they brewed their coffee with Red Bull instead of water. And I was like, that can't taste good, and that cannot be good for you.
That sounds like fun. But what does sound like fun is all the decisions that are coming. We know there is. Cleveland's got a big one already, right? There's a big one of their first. They have to sit there and jump and make a big decision in this like opening week of the offseason.
Yeah, so let's give you a quick rundown of what's going to happen in November. So starting Thursday or Friday, I don't know a decision on whether or not to pick up John Means' 2026 option for $6 million. That's coming up this week. And then starting next week, is it next week? No, it's 2 weeks from now. And it's 2 weeks from today. They will have to make their decisions on who they're going to add to the 40-man roster, protect the Rule 5 draft. And then later that week on Friday, the 21st, they'll have to go through their non-tender decisions, who they're going to bring back on contracts, who they aren't. And a lot of that I expect will be made before the Rule 5 date, just because they're going to want to clear some spots for Rule 5. And there are some, as we like to say, and as Tony Lastoria like to say, there's a lot of roster fodder going on right now. Like, Matt Crook and Dom Nunez are still technically part of this team. And, there's still Nolan Jones and Will Brennan and Colby Allard, who
roster fodder, for those who don't know, is when we give the shout out to Tony, because you need some guys that are easy to get rid of. If you're like 40, that's why you sometimes play that game. Like, you don't put someone on the roster so you don't have to risk losing them later, right? Like,
yeah. And then next month, you've got, the Rule 5 draft, you've got winter meetings, all that kind of stuff that's coming up in December. We'll get to more of those things in the coming days and as the dates come up on there. But the John Means thing specifically, like I've had a couple people ask me, is it a guarantee? I don't think, like, I can't sit here and say 100% certainly they're going to pick up John Means' option because I'll be honest, like his return from his second Tommy John did not go very well. Like he had some pretty ugly starts. They didn't bring him up in September to start because A, he was pitching poorly, and B, the season got to be too important for them to come back to risk it with him. Like they didn't even do it on the final day of the season because they wanted to avoid the wild card and wanted to win the division. So you had a better. I mean, they didn't go with Gavin Williams, but they went with Logan Allen instead of John Means. So I think for that reason, it's not a slam dunk. And I think the Guardians may also want to be. I know this is going to rile up some feathers or ruffle some feathers here, but they're going to want to be careful. They don't have a lot of money on the books, but if they're going to put any money back on the books to bring things back up, they're going to want to be, judicious in how they do that. The only thing I could say is, like, you don't have Ortiz, more than likely. At the very best case, he's going to be suspended. At the very worst case, his career is over. And I would expect, by the way, that decision comes down before the Rule 5 deadline. And the way I keep hearing it described is that they don't count against the 40-man roster. I know I've had some conversations with our buddy Andrew about whether or not they count against the 40, and everybody seems to be saying they don't count against the 40. And I don't know why. The rules are very.
As long as they're on the restricted list. As long as the restricted list exists and they're on that, till there's a decision, they're on the restricted list. After the decision, I believe then they're off that restricted list. And either their careers are over or then Cleveland has to come to a decision.
So they need. So they have to wait until LeBron James sits down with Jim Gray in Connecticut. Is what you're saying? At a Boys and Girls Club.
And I'm not locking into that one.
I don't think it's a slam dunk because he struggled. But Jeff, if you look at the free agent market, John Means is going to be 33 next season. That would make him, one of the 10 youngest free agent pitchers on the market. And his last healthy season was 2021 when he had a 2.5 Fangraphs WAR. That would put him at 5th this offseason for free agent pitchers. I mean, this is the top 5, Jeff. The top 5 for WAR from 2025 is Ranger Suarez, Framber Valdez, who's 32, Dylan Cease, who had a rough year. Merrill Kelly is the 4th best at 3.1, who's 37. Number 5 at 2.4 is Chris Bassett, who's also 37. Shout out to the Akron Zips baseball team, who also came up short in the World Series. But like John Means would be kind of valuable. The problem is, which version of John Means do you get? Because you have to guarantee him a rotation spot if you pick up the option.
Yeah, or you have to be looking to trade him immediately. $6 million is nothing for a starting pitcher. It really isn't. Like, even for this team that gave, Paul Sewald $7 million to be a reliever, $6 million is nothing. But I think the elephant in the room with John Means is he's had 2 good years, 2019 where he was an all-star and finished second the rookie of the year, and 2020. And outside of those 2 years, or 2021, I'm sorry, 2020, he was, it was a weird year. He only had 10 starts because of the situation in baseball. So you kind of throw that out. And as you mentioned, it's just been a lack of health and just not a chance to really show. So like if they saw things, those $1 million buyouts, so it's like, well, if you're spending 1, why not spend 6? Like if they, this is a team that does a great job judging and evaluating pitching. If they didn't like what they saw, they're going to move on, and I won't have a problem with it because they do that as well as anyone.
We'll talk a little bit more about the decision on John Means. It looks like it's coming up this week. We'll talk about how award season is driving money for the Guardians' decisions this offseason, and we'll get into the Hall of Fame debate and Kenny Lofton snubbed again on the rest of today's Locked On Guardians. Today's episode of Locked On Guardians brought to you by our friends at Game Time. The NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. And we all know when you're buying tickets, the most annoying part is queues, login screens, and when the prices at checkout jump way higher than what you thought you were getting when you were searching for the tickets. That's exactly why I use Game Time. You should too. It's the app that gives fan advantages back to fans like us. It's 100% authentic tickets delivered on time, backed with a Game Time guarantee, all fees included. So the price is what you see, it's what you pay. At checkout, I'm using Game Time to get Jonas Brothers tickets next week. I'm using it to get Cavs tickets this offseason. I'm using it to get some NHL tickets as well. It's a very simple and easy way to get a great deal. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's going to get you $20 off your first purchase on Game Time. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Thanks for hanging with us here on Locked On Guardians, and thanks you for making us part of your routine. Your first listen today and every day, wherever it is you get podcasts. Please, 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 if you haven't yet, hit the bell on YouTube so you get notified when all of our episodes go live. If we do go live, and any reaction videos to any news this offseason, we posted there as well. And if you want to make sure you're keeping up with the daily podcast feed, because we are still 5 days a week during the off season, you can auto download on your favorite podcast app. We're everywhere and free. You get podcasts. That's never going to change. And we can be in your feed every single day when you're walking the dog and you're doing your dishes, you're working out. I don't know if I could listen to my own voice working out personally, but hey, whatever gets you through the day. And talking Guardians baseball hopefully does. Jeff, the reason you said $6 million is not a lot of money to pay John Means, and I think I agree in a vacuum. I also agree within the context of this free agent pitching market this offseason. But we look at the Guardians rotation, right? You have Gavin, you have Tanner, you have Cantillo, all guys that will be guaranteed to be in the rotation next year. And then you've got Slade, who I think, you pencil in because he earned it. And then there's that battle for the fifth spot between Logan, and then if you pick up John Means. I don't think John Means has any trade value. I just really don't. Yeah, I know the price is pretty good for a 33-year-old who, does have a limited track record of success, but it's going to be a lot cheaper than trying to sign, Merrill Kelly. And where do you put him when you stack up? I guess Brandon Woodruff came to mind. He's got 3 good seasons of data, and really 2. He only threw 121 innings in 2019. If you take that out, which actually was his third best season, so he's got 3 years as opposed to John Means' 2, and that's a guy who's had now this offseason. Is the same age, and has had the same amount of injuries. Honestly, maybe even worse injuries than John Means. That's where I am, and the fact that again, I do think the Guardians want to be judicious about how they spend this money this offseason. For reasons that. You're just making sure they're putting back into the team what makes the most sense. And I don't know for sure if John Means is a slam dunk to make the most sense.
Yeah, and this is, like I said, line. They had 2 months to see him. The one thing they do better than anyone else, and I know people will be like, hey, Seawald was bad. It's like, okay, they took a gamble. And I still feel like that was more of a vote pull because he knew Seawald. But that's also, pulling Festa off the scrap heap. And no matter how you feel about Matt Festa, without Matt Festa, they probably don't win that division. He was more valuable than not at the end of the day. And they've done a really good job, I feel like. And so what we talked about when they traded for Slade Ciccone, when we talked about them adding some of the pitchers that they've had, is they probably do their best scouting and evaluation for arms at AA and above. So if they decide to let John Means go, then that's enough for me. Then I can look at the situation and be like, okay, they did not view him to be worth this small amount of money. And there's enough concerns and questions that I'm not going to second guess. I'll just move on and look at that situation. If they keep him, it does kind of set up a situation where, he is likely penciled in as your 5th starter. And while he has no trade value right now, I agree with you. It's like at the end of spring training, if he pitches well in spring and teams start losing and, teams are going to lose starters, arms are going to start dropping, you can flip a pitcher in spring training. Like a guy like John Means, if he pitches well in spring training, you're not going to get a ton, but I will say a player like him will have value because people get hurt. Arms fall off. Heck, Cleveland might need another starter by that time. So
that's a good point.
It's just, that's a good
point. You get to spring training. It makes more sense now to pick his option up. Then again, I'm just looking at the market and I'm like, could you get better value for similar money with Michael Lorenzen, with Zach Littell, with Griffin Canning, with
I think
Aaron
those guys will get
Savali.
more than $6 million though. All those guys will get more than
Yeah.
$6 million on the market.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. There are, I mean, yeah, it's a really bad free agent market for starting pitching. It's abysmally bad. Speaking of money paid to guys, so one of the decisions I think we mentioned that will probably come down this week or next week will be, if they announce it publicly, which I assume they will in some form, is an extension for Stephen Vogt. It sounds like that's probably already done. They just haven't announced it. Tony Vitello, who I've never seen this happen before, I don't think anybody ever has, a college head coach going straight to the major leagues as a manager to the Giants. He's making $3.5 million next year for the next 3 years. He's making $3.5 million. That makes him one of the highest paid managers in baseball, with the guy with zero major league or pro experience, which is wild. Stephen Vogt last year was paid slightly more than that. So, I mean, I'm just looking at that. Stephen Vogt, A, deserves an extension. B, is going to get a nice pay raise just based off that alone.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to get a pay raise. I don't know how much it's going to be in the end. Like the whole Tony Vitello situation was they had to pay him to get him, which is always the way it is with those type of guys. I mean, I still think that it's not the worst managerial decision of the offseason. That was the Twins with Derek Shelton, who has been a multi-time failure. We don't even have time to get into how weird that was. As opposed to where I think the Nationals made a super good call on theirs. It's a done deal. Like, it's pretty much been alluded to multiple times. You're going to hear that announcement soon.
Let me ask you this. How much do you want to pay Stephen Vogt? Would you pay Stephen Vogt made as much as Ron Washington last year, which to me is wild. First of all, in 2025, would you pay Stephen Vogt more than Aaron Boone?
No.
Would you pay him more than Torey Lovullo in Arizona?
I think a manager, I don't know what these guys make, but for me, it's more like, if I'm going to pay a manager, it's probably, I want to pay him middle of the pack money. I don't want to pay him top 10 money.
You don't want to pay him top 10 money. Okay. What about Alex Cora? Would you pay Stephen Vogt more than Alex Cora?
I don't know what he makes, so I can't comment. I think the manager's impact anymore is so spread out.
I'm not asking about money. I'm asking more about how important and how good of a manager he is, not based on money.
Well, I mean, I think he's better than the guys you've mentioned, but like, I also just don't think managers are worth that much comparative to the other aspects because of how much it is a group think situation anymore. How much it comes from so many different angles and places and peoples.
Let me tell you where Stephen Vogt ranked last year among managers in terms of salary. So Dave Roberts this is 2024. Dave Roberts in 2024 made $8.1 million. He was the highest. Second was Craig Counsell, his first year at the Cubs, $8 million. Alex Cora, $7.3 million with the Red Sox. Third, Torey Lovullo got $5 million. And then after that, we've got a two-way tie for fifth. It was Bruce Bochy and Aaron Boone at $4.5 million. And then after that, we had a four-way tie between Ron Washington, Stephen Vogt, Bob Melvin, Mike Schilt, and then Brian Snitker. All made $4 million. And the only guy who still has a job out of that group is Stephen Vogt. Snitker's gone, Schilt's gone, Washington's done, Melvin has moved on. He's the only guy left. So he's getting more money.
And that's why I wouldn't pay him. How many of those guys were just fired or were ineffective? Like, it's such a group think job and more about what they give to you. That's why I wouldn't give anyone big money at that spot.
He's gonna get a bump over $4 million just because Vitello's getting $3.5 million. And because he's getting his second manager of the year nomination. He finished top 3 in that too. It's with John Schneider and Dan Wilson. I would expect one of those guys to get it and Stephen Vogt to finish second or third, but he's still in the running. I think it just tells you, like, he's probably going to get $5 million a year. He's going to make more than Aaron Boone. I just wonder what that says about that manager value.
Well, we'll see.
Like,
it's a pretty big jump. When they had Tito, they made him. Yeah, I mean, just because manager is still such a, like, the percentage jumps with $8 million being the highest, it's kind of different. But when Tito was here, he was the highest paid manager, I believe, at one point, so not surprising.
Yeah. we'll see more about that. We'll talk a little bit more about the awards, and we'll talk about Kenny Lofton, snubbed from the Hall of Fame permanently. Yikes. Next on Locked On Guardians. This episode of Locked On Guardians brought to you by Prize Picks. Look, we all have to make decisions every day, right? That's just the fact of life. But on Prize Picks, you can get paid for being right. Where else can you say that? You don't want to miss out any excitement during these off-season sports, NFL, NBA, NHL, all that kind of stuff. If you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is actually really easy and simple to play daily fantasy. All you got to do is pick more or less on 2-player stats in any game. If you get those right, you're going to win. It takes less than a minute to set a lineup, and you can play anywhere Prize Picks operates. All you got to do is go in there and pick 2 stats more or less. Donovan Mitchell's points, Evan Mobley's blocks, anything you could do on the Browns if you think it's a worthwhile pick. They have the injury reboot too. So if you're one of those people who had Jalen Daniels in your lineup and he was out, they have the injury reboot that won't cost you your projections. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB. You'll get $50 in lineups to play after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups to play after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, where it's good and it pays. To be right. We'll cut off there. Thanks for checking out Locked On Guardians. After you finish listening to today's show, head on over to Locked On MLB. No more MLB game night because there's no more games, but our pal Sully will be breaking down all the storylines this offseason, post-mortem World Series, off-season stuff. There's a lot of good history stuff. I know some people have been enjoying Jeff's history stuff in his solo episodes. You can get even more of that from a national perspective from Sully over at Locked On MLB. So head on over there when you finish up today's episode. The other thing I was going to say too is that Steven Kwan, he won another Gold Glove. That's going to push his arbitration. I'm sure the arbitration won't go much higher than what MLB trade rumors projected because they're usually pretty close on that, and the Guardians will probably settle with him before they get there. But that's going to bake in. Like that's one of those big things that drives arbitration figures is awards and another Gold Glove. 4 years and 4 Gold Gloves for Steven Kwan. It says something too. We could probably have this episode in the future, but it says something about the value of left field defense, I think too.
We've talked about it a bit. Like that's where most balls go.
Yeah, because everyone's trying to pull the ball. A lot of your hitters are right-handed, so that's just the fact of things. All right, let's talk about Outfield and Kenny Lofton. Though the contemporary ballot for 2026 came out on November 3rd, and it didn't include Kenny Lofton. It did include former Cleveland Indian Jeff Kent. Included Barry Bonds. It included Roger Clemens, Carlos Delgado, who I think is very underrated, Don Mattingly, who his injuries robbed him of a better career, Dale Murphy, who's been very popular, Gary Sheffield, who played for a lot of teams, was very good, and then Fernando Valenzuela. No Kenny Lofton. And I'm just going to come out and say it. Kenny Lofton, for worse, for one reason or another, is being snubbed because of the era he played in, which is part of what happens with the Hall of Fame. You're judged by a class of your peers. You're compared to the peers of your timeline. That's why they do the contemporary ballot. That's why they do the historical ballots. And that's what you get judged on when you are up on the ballot. Kenny Lofton, unfortunately, as good as he is being left out because of the era he played in. I think he was just simply played in the wrong era. I think he's a great talent, but he played in an era where the things he did aren't valued as much, unfortunately.
Though most of that list is guys from his era. So
that's what I'm saying. But he does. But look at the list. You've got Barry Bonds, home runs.
Mattingly was not home runs.
No, he was not.
Murphy was kind of had some home run moments, but he's the classic small peak.
But four out of those 6 hitters were all home run hitters.
Yeah,
I mean, to be fair, Murphy and Mattingly were a little before Lofton's peak. So the guys that were playing the length of Lofton's career that are on this ballot of hitters are Bonds, Delgado, Kent, and Sheffield, and they all hit the crap out of the ball.
So I literally compounded all the numbers. I put every player by WAR who is not in the Hall of Fame and made a list. And here's where I'm going to. this is where I'm gonna get myself in trouble. Kenny Lofton deserves, if you are making a list of like 8 players, he deserves to be on that list there. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. And the reason I say that is just when you look at what he does in his career numbers, he is, in terms of guys who aren't in the Hall of Fame, he's right between Robinson Cano and Craig Nettles. Kevin Brown is in that range. Dwight Evans is in that range. Just above him, Rick Ruchel, Bobby Grich. Like, these are a lot of guys who are not Hall of Famers. He's in the range where it gets softer, where it's a bigger debate. And he had a lot of great moments, played well, but he, had one of those careers where he just got to compile a lot as well. And I think he's the classic Hall of Very Good. Like, he is just that guy who, in my opinion, isn't quite there, but I think it's a travesty that he's not on this list. The other guy too, that's kind of in the situation with him, you could argue, is Lou Whitaker, who actually has like 7 more WAR than him. Whitaker and Lofton kind of stand out. But just to talk about these other guys, Don Mattingly, 42-4. He played forever as well. He is tied with Lenny Dykstra, Jose Canseco, and Davey Lopez. Dale Murphy, he's just below Matt Williams in terms of, total valor. Delgado is 441st all time, tied with Cupid Childs, which is just a fun name. And Jeff Kent, to give you some current idea, 224 and 246, or Jose Ramirez and Frankie Lindor. So, like, you've got some guys, like Kent had a ton of home runs, but he also had a late peak with performance-enhancing help. Dale Murphy had a small peak. Delgado was kind of that same situation where a peak and fell off. Mattingly was not a power guy at first base. Like, he was defense and on base, which was not as valuable at playing a less valuable position. And Valenzuela was a short peak. Now, the fun thing is going through this whole list and maybe I'll share this with the insiders, 61 deep, as I got to find out Urban Shocker was from Cleveland, who is 204th all time with Cole Hamels and Mark Burley. I got to find out about Jack Glasscock. There's some fun names on this list. But the other interesting thing is, if you go down from Kenny Lofton, I mentioned former Indian Craig Nettles, not that far down from him. Buddy Bell is just 2 points below him. Louis Tiant, just 2 points below him as well. Like, these are not guys that, like, I've never heard anyone make the Buddy Bell case for the Hall of Fame. Maybe you can make one below. And I'm not saying, again, not that these guys aren't very, very good players, but I'll also say a lot of times when I'm playing OOTP, it's like the number 60 is a cutoff for me. Like, if you're above 60, I consider voting for you. So if you think he's a Hall of Famer and you disagree with me, fine. Like, I wouldn't fight it hard. It's a situation where he's a borderline Hall of Fame candidate. But the fact of the matter is, he's a borderline Hall of Fame candidate who has never been treated like a borderline Hall of Fame candidate. He's been treated like a guy who was a 4th outfielder. For him to fall off the ballot in year 1, for him not to have 5 guys on that list ahead of him, at least, like I said, Lou Whitaker is in his same situation. You can debate Lofton and Whitaker as 2 guys who are like right on that cusp one way or the other. And at least Whitaker, I believe, got to stay for all 10 ballots and never made it.
He did.
Lofton.
And he'll be on one of the.
Yeah. Lofton, and then
well.
Jim Edmonds, who is down here somewhere on my list, like 60th. Like, we're 2 guys who fell off right away. It's crazy to look at. Too. But those 2 guys should have lasted longer. It is fun to look at the list. If you're curious, very quickly, top 10. Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, A-Rod, Pujols, Trout, Verlander, Kershaw, Rose, Schilling, Greinke.
So the other thing too for Lofton, why he got screwed here, is that he fell off the ballot not necessarily because of what he did or didn't do in his career. He fell off the ballot because the writers that year decided they were going to be the big story, not the players, because that was the first year that guys like Bonds and Sheffield and Clemens and Kent were all on the ballot, and the writers decided we're going to make a stand. The writers, when you're in baseball, any sports media, you are not the story. You are covering the story. You are not the story. So there was a lot of, I'm just going to say, a lot of older egotistical writers who felt like they were going to make a statement and become the story of this. And that's why Lofton fell off, number 1. If Lofton goes on the ballot with guys who are not in that steroid era, then he probably gets the full 10 years. But they decided we're not going to vote for anybody this year. So that screwed him, number 1. I don't know the criteria to get on these ballots, who is on the committee to put together these like era ballots. But yeah, he definitely belongs on here. Do I think he's a Hall of Famer? I think it's very borderline. Like, you can look at a lot of guys that are out there, right? Like Tim Raines is the one I think that's easily bring up. You're talking about you're evaluating Lofton based purely on Baseball Reference WAR, no matter who he's compared with, pitchers, first baseman, shortstops, whatever. I look at this, and I think other people do too, is I look at it more judging people against their same position. Like, there's a reason Jose Ramirez is a first ballot Hall of Famer, because he's one of the best third basemen of all time. But if you stack his numbers up against other guys, he's not going to look as good, because he's not going to get to those benchmarks of 500 home runs and a 300 batting average, like all those things that used to get you in, or that used to be the benchmark to get in. He's not going to get those. But because he's one of the best third basemen of all time, he's compared to other third basemen. Kenny Lofton should be compared to some of the other center fielders. Like, he has some numbers that are superior to, Tris Speaker. He has more home runs than Tris Speaker, right? He has more steals than Tris Speaker.
Different eras, though. I mean, different eras.
Yeah,
That's the problem with those comparisons.
Right. And that is the problem. You're right. But like Kirby Puckett, he's got a better overall WAR than Kirby Puckett. Kirby Puckett's in, one of the best guys of all time. Kirby Puckett's in because he made 10 All-Star games. Kirby Puckett, if you compare him to Tris Speaker, Duke Snider, Andre Dawson, Kenny Lofton, and Tim Raines, Kirby Puckett doesn't lead any single category in that. Lead WAR, doesn't lead hits, doesn't lead homers. He's got 6 Gold Gloves. Lofton's got 4. All-Star games 10. Lofton's got 6. Lofton never won a Silver Slugger award, but he's got a similar OPS. Like, Kirby Puckett's OPS 837. That's only about 40 points higher than Kenny Lofton at 794. The big thing that really separates Lofton is his 107
That's pretty high.
OPS
40
plus.
points is a lot.
Andre Dawson,
That's because he
806
played forever.
OPS. I'm just saying.
He's also got a ton more home runs.
Yeah, Lofton, to me, yes, he does. You're right, but Kenny has more steals, a higher batting average, a higher on base percentage.
Steals and home runs
WAR.
are just different. They're not.
Right, but he's a complete player. I mean, not complete. He doesn't do home runs, but you're still head and shoulders better in certain categories. Lofton made 6 All-Star games to Andre Dawson's 8. The Hawk did win 1 MVP. Lofton won half as many Gold Gloves, but Lofton has a 107 WRC or ALPS plus, which is one of those things that measures eras really well, is OPS plus. So he's just as hurt by his own era of steroid guys for one reason or another. It really sucks. So he's debatable. I don't think he's in, but he also didn't get a fair shot either for reasons far beyond his control. Steroids, writer votes.
That you can't debate.
Crap. Yeah. On tomorrow's show, speaking of Outfield, we'll talk about the free agent market. Free agency officially opens on November 5th, and we will evaluate the Outfield free agent market on tomorrow's show. So come back and join us.
Thank you for joining us. Remember to rate and review, download daily. It helps. And go Guardians.